probably about 5 seconds long on that. Okay, well. And this will be a spot to solicit people to help with the next camp meeting. If you've been enjoying the revival programs that have been coming to you from Western Montana Camp Meeting 98, you might want to be part of Western Montana Camp Meeting 99. We're already putting the plans together. We plan to hold it July 11th through the 17th. We're not sure just where, except somewhere around Missoula. But we need people to help with that. We'll need people to work at the altar. We'll need musicians, singers, all these things. If you'd like to volunteer, contact the ministry by mail or email and let us know. Power Music invites independent Christian music and comedy artists to send their videos or, in the case of our All Indie radio program, their audio for inclusion on Power Music. Video should be in VHS, Super VHS, or 3/4-inch format. Audio can be on either cassette or CD. We can accept either one. Send those to Power Music, Post Office Box 7392, Missoula, Montana, 59807, so that we can include you on our programs. Ooh. Ah. You there? I could use a pencil right quick like. A pencil. Pencil? September 30th. Now, as I said, this does not affect the 504 real estate loans. It has only to do with the 7A, the guaranteed business loans. And in addition to this allocation, remaining loan guarantee funds, or in addition to allocating the remaining loan guarantee funds among field offices, the SBA will reserve a share for each district's loan fund for its preferred lenders. Now, if you need to know more about this, about what a preferred lender is, about the allocations and the limits and whatnot, you can either call the Small Business Administration's answer desk at 1-800-8-ASK-SBA or visit their homepage at http://www.sba.gov, which you can also access through the link page on our website, which you will see the address for throughout the show in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Now, having gotten through that, we want to talk a little bit about computer security and disaster planning. And there are 6 primary problems with security in management information systems. The biggest one is unauthorized access to hardware, software files. The second biggest seems to be tapping data communications. Third is physical access to telecommunications networks, as in for sabotage or for wiretaps. Which leads us to number 4, which is the tapping of voice and fax networks. And also problem 5, which is remote access to PBX, the telephone systems. And finally, number 6, voicemail fraud. Now, these security problems open avenues where computer criminals can get into the system and commit their crimes. Here again, you have different kinds of computer criminals. You have different kinds of motivations behind the crimes. You have on the bottom end, and this may insult some of them because they don't consider themselves the bottom end, but I'm meaning that not in terms of their abilities, but in terms of their intention to actually hurt your business or the business of your banker or your competitor or whoever, are the hackers. Hackers basically want to break into the system just to be able to say they did. You know, they're not there intending to really do any damage. Oh, they'll usually do a little something just so that you'll know they were there, because what fun would it be to break in if they couldn't prove to you that somebody did? You know, if you weren't going to know it, then it wouldn't be any fun. Now, hackers actually can be a big help. And that sounds a little weird. But they can, because since they're breaking into or trespassing in your system for the purpose of achievement, just to show that they can, then they can also, and some of them will, some of them are very courteous about it. You know, they will break into your system, then they will send you an email, anonymously of course, saying, I broke into your system, and this is how I did it, this is where you have security problems. So you see, some hackers can be very, very helpful. Even those that don't have the courtesy to send you the email message telling you that they broke in and how can still be helpful, because they'll leave some kind of calling card that you know a hacker's been in. So then, if you know they've been in, you can start looking for how they got in. If you can find how they got in, then you can take measures against somebody else being able to get in that may have more insidious motives than just achievement. Just up from them are pranksters. Their trespassing, their breaking into systems is to defy authority. As a result, the vast majority of pranksters break into the systems that most represent authority, such as the NCIC or the Department of Defense computers or the IRS, these kind of things. Here again, like hackers, they will usually leave a calling card. Their calling cards are sometimes a bit more destructive than the average hacker. But they're getting in basically to defy authority. The calling card is, you know, just kind of an in-your-face. And like I said, most of the time, they're trying to go into authority figure systems. That is, the government, the police, you know. Up from them, and as I say, we're basing this on motive, up from them is the amateur. The amateur breaks into your system to steal your computer time for his personal use. Now, the amateur may not have to break in. The amateur may be invited in, because the amateur may be one of your employees that's surfing the net for giggles on your time, or that is playing solitaire or backgammon or whatever they would like to play in Windows or whatever system you're using, instead of doing their work while they're sitting at their terminal. Amateurs are costly to business, but their motive is primarily personal pleasure, not so much personal gain, although there have been instances where amateur computer criminals have used their employer's computer system to post their own web page, which consisted of their resume looking for a way to get employed by somebody else other than their employer. You know, that if they're a pretty key person, that could hurt quite a bit, but primarily they're not a major harm other than in dollars and cents for lost productivity and of both the system and the employee to most businesses. On the other hand, you have professionals who make a living from computer crime. And here we're talking about, for instance, the accountant that manages to use your system to transfer funds from your checking account to his checking account in a way that leaves no audit trail or that looks like just a bank error, you know, in case there's ever any question. Or the person in the warehouse that manages to cheat the system so that they can run off with a lot of the inventory, which they then, having gotten it free, sell at garage sales and flea markets and make a killing on it. Past the professionals, and this is something most small businesses don't have to be too concerned about, but big businesses do. Small businesses do to some extent because big businesses are so used to engaging in this that if they perceive a threat, you know, a competitive threat from a small business, they may engage in this against the small business, and that's the spies that are committing computer crime to gain advantage. Generally, in this case, what they're trying to get a hold of is files where you're working up patents or copyrights, you know, intellectual property protections of some sort, or where you're, you know, so that they can get the patent to the patent office or the copyright to the copyright office before you do. Or where they can find out some of your strategies that are coming out of your executive suite and plan counter strategies. And finally, there are the terrorists. They commit computer crime to advocate extreme positions. These are the people who, because they don't believe you should have to pay taxes, might break into the IRS computer system and try to just completely crash all the tax records. These are the people who, because they don't believe in abortion, might try to break into an abortion clinic's computer system and destroy patient records and appointment records. These are the people who, because they strongly advocate abortion, might try to break into Right to Life's computer system and crash strategies, or else spy on the strategies and counteract them, but that would make them spies more than terrorists. It could be people who advocate communism that try to crash the government system, or people who advocate anarchy on the other end of the spectrum that might do the same thing. There are 7 areas or 7 things that specifically can be done to help combat computer crime. First of all, have your network require passwords. Now that really is less of a safeguard than it seems like. That is basically a safeguard against the amateur who is trying to steal computer time for personal use. Maybe this is a person who really, their job in your company has no need for computer time at all, but they're trying to get in and use computer time. So if they have to have a password to use the system, then unless they steal a password, they're not going to get in. By the same token, you can use these passwords to stop unauthorized access to certain files or programs. For example, an accounts payable clerk has absolutely no need to have access to payroll records. So if you have the payroll records passworded, only the payroll clerks can get to them. By the same token, maybe you have some people, of course, that have to get into everything, some of the top executives. In that case, yeah, their password would go everywhere. Computer network audit trails. And they're back to the passwords too. You can password protect programs. So in other words, if only certain employees need to access the internet, you can stop Netscape from working on or MS Explorer or whatever net browser you're using from operating unless the right passwords are put in. Computer network audit trails, being able to tell who's been on the network from what terminal when and what, that helps, particularly to protect against, again, the amateur, the one stealing computer use for personal time. Limiting physical access to the equipment. Now, if we're talking about the computers again, you're after the professional, or after the amateur. If we're talking about the telecommunications system, the actual hardware, the wiring, and that kind of thing, then we're probably talking more about professionals and spies and terrorists. Telecommunications security training, you should have that anyway if you have a telecommunications network of any kind. Dial-back protection on computer networks. In other words, if someone dials up, they have to give a number and then the network calls them back. That way you don't have somebody just dialing up and going right into the network. Therefore, you can, if it's not in the file, in this file, the number that's given, then it doesn't get called back, and therefore it doesn't access the network. If it is in the file and they were giving a false number, it's not going to call back the terminal that number came from. Data encryption and telecommunications encryption. Data encryption is pretty easy. That can be done with, well, in fact, it's done every day. If you have most major word processors on your computer, try opening that file in anything that doesn't read ASCII, because most of the time those files are saved in ASCII code. It's an encryption. It's not a real good encryption because but there again too, most word processors have proprietary file formats. It's just that they read each other. So, but that's a very basic example of data encryption. There are programs that do a whole lot better than that for you. Telecommunications encryption would actually encode, decode telecommunications over data transmission lines, over fax transmission lines. It can even be used over voice lines as long as both parties involved have the equipment. To ensure computer security specifically, install antivirus software. That's one of the biggies because to the prankster, the calling card may be a virus. Test sample discs from each mass shipment you get. If you go out to Staples and you buy one of those boxes with 100 discs in it, test a sample of that, a random sample, or alternately, something that I've tended to do quite a bit is, even though they say they're formatted, reformat them. That limits, it doesn't completely do away, but it limits. You can also, before you reformat, just to be on the safe side, virus test them. Prohibit the sharing of software or disks among your employees and among your computers. Check periodically for unexpected changes in program size or other signs of viruses. The virus has to go somewhere. If it's being put into a program, the file size on that program is going to grow. And verify the authenticity and integrity of software before you use it. That takes care of the computer security part. Now we've got the disaster planning part, and thank God that's very, very short because it's very, very boring. All we're going to talk about with that is developing a disaster recovery plan. It's basically 5 steps. You perform a risk assessment. What risks do you face? It doesn't make a lot of sense to make plans for floods if you live on top of Mount Sentinel, or if your business is on top of Mount Sentinel. By the same token, if you live somewhere where there has never been an earthquake during all of recorded history, I wouldn't worry too much about an earthquake plan. But perform a risk assessment. See what risks you're dealing with. Then recommend and implement safeguards according to what the risks are. Develop a priority risk of your list of your computer applications so that you know what has to be recovered first, what needs to have off-site backups and everything else. Define your disaster recovery plans for high priority systems, and practice the emergency alternate procedures. For the accounting department, that might be having to keep the books manually. Wow, until the files are recovered. For other departments, it may mean other things. For the steno pool, it may mean having to keep proficiency with manual typewriters. But anyway, that's basically it. And that will wrap up our discussion of management information systems, and just in time too. Now, because you asked, we'll see if we can give you an answer. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, if you have a question for the Because You Asked segment, you can, there's a form in our website that you can enter it, or you can mail it to our P.O. box, or you can just do a straight email if you don't want to fool with the form. Any of those ways is acceptable. The question today is, I have what I think would be a great idea for a business, but my credit isn't good enough to get a bank loan. Is there some other way to find money to start a business? Well, now, I could spend a lot of time on that, because we've done, and we'll probably do again, a seminar, Finding Financing for Your Small Business. And that's a 4-hour seminar. But let me just try to boil it down a little bit. You don't qualify for a bank loan on your own. Will you qualify for an SBA guarantee? If so, now with the current restrictions, it may mean waiting a little bit, but the SBA will guarantee up to $375,000 of a $500,000 loan, so you'd only have to have good enough credit to get the rest. And that's, you can figure out the percentage, because I think it's 75% or something like that. Second of all, of course, there's the FFDD network, family, friends, doctors, and dentists, that you can possibly borrow money from. Finally, you could incorporate the business. You could go through the registration, which isn't much if it's under $1 million, and only slightly more if it's between $1 million and $5 million. and actually go ahead and take your startup public through a Rule 504 or Regulation A offering. And for information on those, you can, well, there is a wealth of information available on that directly from the Securities and Exchange Commission. What you should do, I will warn you, after much dealing with the SEC over the internet, the fastest way to get information from the Securities and Exchange Commission is to email your regional office. For those of us in Montana, that's San Francisco. For our North Dakota viewers, I'm not sure what that is. But I'd have to look, but then the SEC webpage will tell you that. But contact your regional office. If you try to go through the info desk in Washington, D.C., you may as well write the President of the United States and ask for it. Next week, your business plan, business summary. Till then, just mind your own business.